So in part 3 of the 300 Blackout series, we're going to discuss hardware and kind of things related to building or converting over a 300 Blackout AR. Essentially, all you're going to need is a barrel swap. Other parts, all will work fine. Magazines, upper, lower, everything. Same thing as 5.56, just the barrel. However, gas systems in 300 Blackout are very different than your 5.56 gas systems. Generally, I would recommend going 7.5 inch to 10.5 inch barrels for 300 Blackout, is that's really what they're designed for. However, if you're in a state that doesn't allow that and you have to do something like 16-inch barrel, you can go either carbine or pistol length gas system. Rifle length and mid-length gas systems simply won't work in 300 Blackout. There's just not enough pressure to allow the action to cycle reliably. For 16-inch barrels, you can either go carbine or pistol. If you're going to go carbine, look at something like 0.110-inch gas port size with the carbine gas tube. That should cycle your supersonics very well, and most likely your subsonics pretty reliably with and without a suppressor. If you go 16-inch barrel with a pistol length gas system, 0.067 is probably the gas port size you want to look at. This should cycle your supers fine. Subsonics may be a little bit iffy. It might work, it might not, depending on the load. However, with a suppressor attached, it should be fine. 9.5 inch or 9 inch, like the 9 inch AAC upper that's really popular. 0.093 inch gas port size is what you're going to want to start looking at, and that should cycle supers and subs fine. That's probably the most reliable setup for a short barrel in a 300 Blackout SBR or pistol. If you go shorter than that, again, like 7.5 inch, this one here, 8 inch, 0.093 inch gas port size and a pistol length gas system should work well. However, subs may not be quite as reliable. This is, of course, remedied by putting on a suppressor for the additional back pressure. As I've said before, if you're shooting subsonics, you really want to be shooting them through a suppressor to really see this platform shine and get the most out of it. If you're shooting subsonics without a suppressor and it's not reliable, it's not something I would really recommend doing anyway. If you start opening up the gas port size to cycle supers and subs fine in very short barrels or things that are right on the cusp, you're going to run the risk of getting things like your 110 grain rounds very much overgassed, just so it cycles to the 220s without a suppressor on, and I don't really recommend that. So for me, the 7.5 inch barrel with a 0.93 gas port and pistol length cycles very well with supers and subsonics with the suppressor. It can get kind of finicky with subs if I take the can off, but that's not a giant concern to me. If you're looking at, 7.5 to 8 inch barrel and you want subsonic reliability, you might have to open it up as much as 0.120 inches, which is really going to overgas your supersonic rounds. Of course, you can remedy this with adjustable gas blocks and things like that if you want to choose to do so. Again, with cycling, the other thing besides the gas system and gas port size you want to look at is actually the buffer weight. A lot of ones, especially on SBR and pistol applications, I would look at an H2 buffer, a little bit heavier just to get everything cycling at a correct speed. If you have the action cycling too hard or you're overgassed, you're going to get extra recoil and you're going to have the bolt slamming against the back of everything every shot. You could also get into having it bounce off the back and other issues there that are going to cause you problems. If it's undergassed or, you're, like I said, if in gas port settings where subsonic rounds might not cycle reliably, it's not going to kick the bolt back far enough or hold it back far enough to where you'll experience failure to feed sometimes and almost always failure to lock backs on an empty magazine. So aside from your gas settings, you really want to tune your buffer weight and buffer setup to have it cycle really right in the sweet spot. And I think that's very important, especially with 300 Blackout. But again, H2 buffers are generally what I would say for most people running 300 Blackout in shorter barrel platforms. The other issue you might run into is magazines. So 5.56 magazines all will work to an extent. And I will say that, you know, your 5.56 P mag, if you look at this, load up with 5.56 now, there's a rib on the side. The rib presses into the neck of the brass on the 5.56 to keep them lined up. If you're using heavier projectiles like your 220 grain Sierra Match Kings, this rib will actually press into the O-give on the bullet itself, causing the rounds to tilt or bind up. This can lead to failures to feed, and even if you manually cycle the bolt, it will still fail. However, you can grind these down. It's a very quick and easy fix, and I'll throw up a video describing how to do that shortly here in the next week or so. It might already be up by the time you see this. So things like PMags, you may or may not run into issues with subsonic rounds, the really heavy ones. Things like Lancer magazines and most USGI mags don't have this issue. It seems to be mostly on PMags and the ones where that rib actually presses against the heavier subsonic rounds to tilt them and cause them to bind up. The last piece of hardware I'd really look into is, of course, a suppressor. Since 300 Blackout does shine so well in short barrel and suppressed applications, getting a can on the end here, you know, is a really good idea. Personally, I would recommend either something like the Saker 762 or the AAC SDN6. Both are very good cans. I would personally steer away from pistol cans. A lot of people do it, but with tax stamps and the wait times, I think you're going to get more versatility and longevity from doing a full-on 30 cal can that's rated for shorter barrels and rapid fire. You can also throw these on your 308s or 5.56 or whatever else without really worrying about damaging the can. There's, you know, a lot of suppressors out there and a lot of great ones, so that really boils down to personal choice and what you want to get out of your suppressor. Additionally, some of the pistol suppressors that people are running 300 Blackout for are only rated for subsonic, so you shouldn't really be shooting supersonic through it. If you get a full-on 30 cal can, you can shoot both. And for me, if I'm shooting 300 Blackout, it's probably always going to be suppressed. So I want something that can handle every round I put through it. If you guys have any questions, concerns, anything like that, of course, the usual spiel, put them in the comments section, send me a message, and I'll get back to those as soon as possible.